You're listening to 91.7 FM, WSUW, in Whitewater, Wisconsin. You're listening to Rashkin Report. You're listening to WSUW 91.7 FM, The Edge in Whitewater, Wisconsin. This is Yuri Rashkin, and you're listening to Rashkin Report. I'm excited to welcome back to the program Dmitry Dubrovsky, a scholar at Herriman Institute at Columbia University in New York. Dmitry, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Well, you're enjoying the summer in New York City, which is, I think, a wonderful thing, unless it gets a little too hot and too humid. But how do you feel about watching what's going on in Russia these days?
Well, I'm interested because I'm currently working on the chapter devoted to human rights and the Olympic Games. Comparative perspective of the Olympics in Moscow and Olympics in Sochi.
Very good. So are you comparing 1980 Olympics and 2014 Olympics?
Yeah, correct.
All right, and what's the preview? Is there differences and similarities, I take it?
Well, it's interesting. The main similarities, it seems to me, they are used the same security measures for the more or less same purposes. So that's like in Moscow 1980s, where the Moscow were converted into the closed city. In contrary with the old Olympic Charter, of course. The same story was created, the same idea was implemented for Sochi 2014, seems to me, because that is the story when the Sochi was cleaned up from all the unwanted person, including human rights activists, Roma people, migrants from the Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, who, by the way, originally created all the Olympic industries in Sochi, and that is more or less remind me the principles of the security in Moscow, because it seems to me that was the same consultancies. I'm thinking the legacy of the KGB still remain in the Russian security services. That's why they simply use the old forms, all the ideas how the security could be achieved. So this is one of my summary I'm describing right now. I'm trying to.
I think from everything we've seen over the last several years, for sure, out of Russia, and seeing that the country is being more or less run by KGB or FSB or whatever one wants to call it, it makes sense that whatever they did in 1980 is what they did in 2014. My experience with 1980 Olympics, being a small 5-year-old child, is that my parents managed to get a ticket out of town because they were trying to get everybody out of town. Like you were saying, Moscow became a closed city.
Absolutely, like in Sochi, by the way.
And ironically, that was the only time I've been to Crimea in my life. But the story that I remember most vividly about Sochi cleanup was that at some point they decided to get rid of all the homeless dogs, and following good Russian tradition, they just threw a bunch of poison around and poisoned a bunch of animals, which resulted in much outcry from Western and basically not Russian animal activists.
Yeah, that's not only one story where what happened in Sochi, except the extermination of the homeless dogs and cats in Sochi. They also seriously violated the rights of the citizens of the Sochi, citizens of Krasnodar region. They forcibly removed thousands of the people, mostly without their adequate compensation. And the Human Rights Watch described all this story together with the violating of the rights of migrants. So that is kind of, exclusive zone. Like, well, I'm using the metaphor in my text the Krasnodar region was temporarily converted into the Chechnya as kind of exclusive zone of the Russian legislation, which is absolutely outside of the covering media, outside of the covering the human rights organization, outside of the any possible way to apply for the any kind of legal protection.
And it worked so well that they decided to expand it to the entire country?
No, it's not very easy. To be honest, current regime, that's the difference of the current regime from my perspective is its inability to cover all this regime into the whole country. So because the authoritarian regime in its classical form, they could distribute the fear and the uncertainty into the whole country, but this is absolutely impossible currently for the Russia, because the institutes of the state, they doesn't work. I'm not saying it doesn't work properly; they doesn't work at all. That's why they are unable to provide both good governance as well as any kind of repression. So the current authoritarian regimes, they don't need the repression as such. So
that's really, really uplifting message that I wasn't necessarily expecting, which is that the system works so poorly that they're not able to provide good things, but they're also not able to provide mass repressions.
Yeah, but they don't need the mass repression. So this is the story.
Right.
Current regime, keeping in mind the Soviet legacy, the current regime could just signify the opportunity, the possibility to turn on these repression tools. At the time, they don't need to, they don't want to turn it on. So in reality, so that's the most of the situation I'm observing right now in Russia is not a result of the pressure. It's rather a result of self-repression, like in Russia did in the terms of the self-sanctions, as well as self-limitation, self-censorship. Well, even the situation in mass media, I would say the 80% of all the cases is not a result of the direct pressure from the Kremlin. Is it the result of the self-repression, self-censorship applied for the owners or directors of the different media to themselves?
And to add to that is a little bit of what's in Russia called running ahead of the train, where you have people who maybe don't have any direct assignment to do any harm to anybody, but they feel like that's what their boss would like, and so they take the initiative. And I think that so much about Russian story seems luckily fairly far away from life in the United States. However, I think that as we look at general election and possibility of Mr. Trump, at least technically possibility of becoming a president, I think those kinds of things of trying to please your boss and everything's being based on loyalty versus competence, I think those are the kind of themes that may have not necessarily an application, but I think here in America we should pay more attention to those kind of stories.
Well, honestly, I'm certainly not. I'm not a specialist in the American political system as well as elections. But my understanding of the current election is this is the good test for the American political system in general, and I believe that the American political system, with all the possible threats, it's still really stable to survive after the Trump as a president. Well, honestly, I believe. Look. If you remember the common fear in Poland when the first time the communists started to be the president. Well, it was the common outcry. So the people were very disappointed. Oh, we have a communist. They will immediately turn the country back to the Soviet Poland communist system, but it never had happened because the political system already was changed, and it has been changed already so serious that even the communist as president cannot change the politics seriously. That is, I'm thinking about the Trump presidency, although it is quite possible still. Could be this serious disaster for the political system, but it's could be, seems to me, the important test. And I believe the American system, political system, still really stable and robust to survive and to correct the Trump illness and to fix all these possible mistakes and atrocities he could organize.
And that is a theme that I heard from several people, especially I think people who are concerned about human rights and the situation in Russia, because the idea of strong institutions is just something that I doesn't seem to be existing in Russia at all, as we've just mentioned earlier. How do you respond to people in America when you have this kind of a conversation, when you maybe say this is what's going on in Russia, and they go, well, that's not too different from what's going on in America?
It's simply impossible to compare. One of the biggest issue in Russia, we don't have a legacy of the strong institute of civil society. Well, I'm afraid to say we practically do not have any visible opposition as well as any visible civil society. The civil society practically crashed as well as opposition movement. So that is just very puzzled, very, very disseminated, very dissoluted entity, which is in reality, this still remain somewhere in Moscow and St. Petersburg, but it's practically do not exist in the regions. It is my favorite example when for example, owner of the only one independent newspaper, as well as the leader of the opposition party, as well as the only one oppositioner as a deputy in Pskov region, Lev Schlossberg. This is just one person for the whole region, which is, by the way, pretty huge. It's like a medium European country. So that is so different from the United States, where a lot of the life happening in the regions. In the states. So a lot of the group of interest, a lot of the different struggles and different and what is important there to understand in the United States still remain the kind of universal agenda on the federal level. It's not necessarily a very political agenda. Well, after the Atlanta, I believe one of the most important questions will be the restrictions of the assault weapons. But as well, it's very much the people are very much involved into the discussion. All the people, and I can see how currently the discussions around the American elections, how they are involved the people into the everyday situation. So in the market, in the public transportation, everywhere the people are discussing this election. The problem is that in Russia, practically nobody is concerned about the elections, which will be, by the way, in the next September. Because on the practice, everybody knows what will happen.
Well, Dmitry, since we're speaking about, since you mentioned the elections that are coming up in September to Russian Duma, sort of like Congress, the big discussion, and this is something that I was speaking with Mr. Schlossberg on this program earlier, is whether people should vote or not. Where do you fall in this conversation? Do you feel that people should go ahead and vote, knowing pretty much who's going to get elected, or should people not vote, or what?
Well, I'm always thinking that the bad institute, it is better than nothing, honestly. So I do believe if all the people participated in the election, they might have any kind of idea of the election. I'm always happy when the people just participating in the election because of they have any kind of understanding what they are doing. Because the most of the population in Russia is just a meaningless ritual, just visiting and voting for those who was appointed by the authority from above. So that seems to me one of the important story. But yes, in current situation, for the political opposition, this is not the election at all, because we don't have any opposition party. So what I would predict, a small reconstruction in the Russian parliament, in the Russian Duma. There might be the Just Russia, Spravedliva Россия will be probably replaced by the Patriot of Russia. Keep it in mind the important shift of the Russian policy from the ideas of justice to the ideas of patriotism and ideas of the national superiority. So this is not election. So that is the problem if you have anybody to vote for. But the problem is we don't have. Well, Lev Schlossberg is exception, but in reality, I'm very much disappointed in Yabloko. Since a very long time ago, I left the Yabloko party several years ago. After the election in St. Petersburg, it's the long story. But I ran for the city legislation, and I failed. But the irony was even me. I was the target of the voters' decision was just miscalculated. I started in the, I don't remember, it was the 8 p.m. It was about 20% votes for me, and in the morning it was 11 already.
So you started out with 20% and ended up with 11.
Just for the night, without being. Well, somehow recalculated. So that's, in reality, it is just all the falsification. The problem in the Russian election is a just system of the mass falsification. It doesn't mean, by the way, that the people do not vote for the United Russia or for the Putin. It means that there is simply no chance for any oppositioner without the agreement, without the permission of the Kremlin to get the State Duma. And that is this is the question: how we would trust to the political oppositioner if he or she supposed to have agreement with the Kremlin to get a State Duma, disregard of the result of the election. So this is the problem. This already cannot be called election per se. So this is not election. It's just a political theater to organize the system of the I would say plebiscite to demonstrate the public support of the current political regime and Putin personality.
You know, one of the really, scary, sad, disappointing things that I see watching the situation in Russia is this general poisoning of the environment when it comes to politics or leadership, because there's a presumption that everybody steals. Therefore, if a state official gets sacked and arrested, well, then there's the assumption that he or she didn't share with somebody. Or if you have a politician who is supposed to be in opposition, that means that they can't get elected, because if they do get elected, that means they made a deal with somebody in power to get elected. So there's this total atmosphere of distrust and just trying to maybe, take what you can today. It seems very short-sighted and generally moving downhill.
That's true, but this is not only the atmosphere of distrust, but I would say the general cynicism in the country. So this is the most of the people are somehow involved in the different acts of corruption on the different levels, and that's why they do believe there's the
and usually I think depends on to whatever level they're able to be involved in the corruption scheme. It's not how much they choose. It's because even if you don't take this extra money or whatever, you're still expected to give the extra money to the person above you.
Yeah, and that's why most of people believe, okay, so this is the kind of inseparable feature for the authority to steal the money, but it depends on how much money you stole. If you too much money were stolen, so that's why there's the time for imprisoned this particular person. If not, okay, so this is more and less acceptable. So this is how I would say tolerance to corruption is very high.
You're listening to WSUW 91.7 FM, The Edge in Whitewater, Wisconsin. This is Rashkin Report, and I'm your host, Yuri Rashkin. And today we are speaking with Dmitry Dubrovsky, who is a scholar at Herriman Institute in Columbia University in New York City. And Dmitry, your roots, or at least a lot of your past, was spent in St. Petersburg, as I understand.
Yep.
How do you see the difference between St. Petersburg and Moscow? Because I think in the grand Russian scheme of things, there's kind of Moscow, then there's St. Petersburg, and then there's everything else. But yet the two cities seem to have a different mindset. You know, I'll go back to 1917 and point to the fact that revolution occurred in St. Petersburg, not in Moscow, because that's where the government was moved at the time. Is there a different dynamic? Is there more volatility? Is there more promise in St. Petersburg than there is in Moscow? Or how do you see the dynamic?
Well, it's interesting. I'm always thinking that the result of the fact that the most of the current authority in Russia, I mean the president himself and all his circle, they are originally from Russia, from St. Petersburg. So that's important. They are from St. Petersburg, and they are because of the principles of the elite conversion right now, or the elite loyalty. The most of the friends of the Putin has been converted into the oligarch, but at the same time, most of them are from St. Petersburg. But they moved to Moscow, and somehow the bureaucrats of the second or third echelon, they replaced the most prominent leaders at that time. So because of all these reformats, they also moved to Moscow. And we have an interesting story. I would say we have in Moscow more advanced, I would say we have a more advanced intellectually community, but less developed civil society. And we have, we comparing Moscow and St. Petersburg, we have maybe in St. Petersburg more conservative, more aggressive city government than we have in Moscow, even. Because, well, all the capitals of all the countries, they are on average more tolerant than the other cities. So this is the rule for the big countries. But the St. Petersburg is something exceptional. So if you know, for example, anti-LGBT legislation born in the different region in Ryazan, but very actively promoted by the notorious deputy of the city legislative body is Milonov, and one of the most aggressive nationalists are living right now in St. Petersburg. So we have a city in the very, I would say, dramatically separated civil society. Let's call it uncivil society, part of it at least, like Stephen Kotkin did. But there we have a very active so-called patriotic movement, Kazakhs, neo-Nazis, and as well as a substantial amount of the people who are liberals, Democrats, Social Democrats as well, so on and so forth. But the one of the biggest issue from St. Petersburg, it's small number of people of activists sometimes for the both sides of this story. And that's just interesting. That is how seriously shrinks the field of the public policy in Russia. So in Russia, public policy shrinks dramatically. So on the practice, we have just several places with all the public policy, St. Petersburg and Moscow. And I would say thousands, no more than 1,000 people who are really involved in the process. I'm very much interested to compare it with the late Soviet Union, whereas most of the Soviet descent were numbered not up to 1,000 people for the whole the Soviet Union. So at that time it was more or less understandable, but currently is rather a result of the, I would say, ideological escapism of the most of the Russian intelligentsia, because for different reasons we have a serious disagreement within academia, within the intelligentsia, and especially about Crimea annexation. So this is one of the most serious shock for any kind of public agreement, which could be organized against Putin. So because for different reasons, Crimea annexation seriously prevented any opportunity to get the agreement within the civil society, and we have a serious disagreement even within our former partners and friends and colleagues about the Crimea annexation. So this is the very difficult, and this is one of the explanation what's going on in Russia right now, because there's the Crimea annexation somehow revitalized I would say, cold civil war within Russian society.
That has been a term that has popped up recently in different reports as this cold civil war, where people are not actively killing each other, but they're definitely separating themselves into those that agree with Crimea annexation, those that disagree, those that take the party, Putin's line, those that feel like essentially it is not fixing the problems that are facing the nation. One of the more interesting and just bizarre elements of today's Russia is that protests that flare up throughout, and because of the media, anyone can broadcast with a phone. We see all these little groups gathering, and they're so frequently they have T-shirts with Putin on them. And they claim that, it's back to the Tsar is good and aristocracy is bad. But they don't have any other leader to appeal to. There is no opposition to speak of. So they're out there saying, we throw ourselves on Putin's mercy to help fix this mess that basically Putin made.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is a good example of how weak this agreement and how, the possible agreement, and how there's a lot of controversy behind this agreement is the story with the St. Petersburg Most breach, Kadyrov Most. So that's the Kadyrov breach. So we have currently, because of the decision of the city government, the title, the new unnamed breach in the memory of Ahmad Kadyrov, who used to be the first president of the Chechnya under new umbrella of Putin, Russia. And interestingly, the mass protests against this name unexpectedly collaborated those who are just protesting against the fact that Kadyrov have nothing common with the St. Petersburg. Those who believe that Kadyrov was one of the criminals who participated in the revolt against the Russian government in Chechnya, as well as those who believe that the Kadyrov is not deserved to be memorized in St. Petersburg because he killed Russian soldiers. And even it's very remarkable, he has the very important and famous quotation that every Chechen man should kill as more Russian soldiers as he can.
And yet, when that banner was hung from the newly named Kadyrov Bridge, the people who did it are not facing any persecution.
Not yet, but interestingly, to represent the disagreement, the citizens, they demonstrating right now the portrait of Colonel Budanov, who was the famous criminal, practically one of the two officers who was punished from the military crime against the Chechenian people. He killed and he tortured, he raped, tortured and killed the young Chechenian woman, and then he was imprisoned for 15 years, and then he was released. Before his term in jail, he was killed. by the Chechenian combatants. And currently, the citizens, to demonstrate the disagreement with the absolutely illegal decision of the city government to name this bridge in the memory of Ahmad Kadyrov, they are demonstrating the portrait, the picture of the Budanov, and they bring in the flower to the Budanov portrait, which is demonstrating the absolutely different kind of agreement. It's a nationalistic agreement. It's not liberal agreement. And they commemorate the murderer, the criminal of the which is the one of the famous. He was famous extremely especially because he's participating in the mass violation of rights of the Chechenian people in the Chechnya during the Chechenian War. So this is the bad sign of how this agreement could look like. When in contrary with the possible agreement about we should fight against this illegal decision because we are liberals, the alternative version, we should fight against this decision because Ahmad Kadyrov killed Russians, and we are commemorating in country. We should commemorate Colonel Budanov, who was exactly murderer of Chechenian people.
You know, this is one of those interesting upsides that I see, the silver lining that I see to the dark cloud that is today's Russia, and that is that all the people on the outside have something in common, and that is they're all on the outside. And I actually kind of go back to the Three Musketeers. I think it's either 20 years later or 10 years later where it's pointed out to one of the characters that the good thing about life before is that all the good guys were on the one side and all the bad guys were on the other side. Right now, because opposition in Russia has no power whatsoever, it really doesn't matter about what the solution is. It's just at the level of diagnosing the problem. And so, nationalists can find something to talk about with liberals and progressives, and, and communists and nationalists are almost in the same camp because neither one has power and both may be opposing what's going on. It's, the hard part is going to happen whenever the regime falls, and these people have to start sorting out specifics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But I'm again. So this is about how diverse is Russian opposition, as well as how seriously the opposition was destroyed by the Crimea annexation. Was one of the good example is the National Bolsheviks Party, which was, by the way, one of the leader of the protest. They are not democratic at all, but they were there in partnership with the most democratical movement at the time of the protest and at the time of before the Crimea annexation. But currently, because of the Limonov position, is the leader of this party, Eduard Limonov, the writer and politicians currently in Russia. But he so dramatically changed their position, and they decided to support the Putin annexation. And they are right now claiming that Putin is the leader of Russian world and Russian people. This is exactly what they are demanding before. So that's currently the political regime in Russia seriously nationalized and seriously shifted, as I have said already, shifted into the nationalistic turn. And this is one of the dangers we have.
You're listening to WSUW 91.7 FM, The Edge in Whitewater, Wisconsin. This is Rashkin Report, and I'm your host, Yuri Rashkin. My guest today is Dmitry Dubrovsky, who is a scholar at Herriman Institute at Columbia University in New York City. Dmitry, Vladimir Putin came out with this kind of to say it mildly, unexpected and, more strongly, maybe earth-shattering statement that United States perhaps is the only super state left, and basically admitting that Russia is not a super state and may not even, might not even make sense to compete. What are your thoughts on this statement, and what kind of consequences do you expect it to have?
Well, Putin is the very professional populist, and he's always believe in the. And he don't believe in loyalty and trust. That's for sure. And if he said something, he might have something beyond it, kind of agreement, kind of idea, which might be softening the current serious crisis in Russia. I believe this is because of this adventure in Syria, because of the Crimea annexation, because of self-sanctions, the economical situation. I'm not saying it's the disaster. No, it's not a catastrophe at all. But it's stably serious bad, stably seriously bad. So that's why I believe that Putin is interesting, especially in before the election, his own election, not only the State Duma, but his own election.
But that's coming up in 2 years.
Yeah, but still. Currently, we are just starting to. I believe we are just in the beginning of the deep crisis. So this is not a crisis. When you have a problem with the foods in the store, this is not a crisis. Crisis will be when they will have a real problem with the payments and the regular payments for this pensioners to the students and to the budget organization. And I would predict it could be in the next year and year after. And this is the message probably to United States: stop pressuring me, because we are already in the very end of our resources. We are not in the end currently, but I believe that Putin is, he's not stupid, he's smart. And that's why he is interesting to have a predictability on his regime and for the foreseeable future. That's why it's 2 years is not so. It runs very, 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 very quick, and I believe this is the kind of message to the new possible president of United States. I believe this is not this is not a message for the country. For the country, we still remain for the Russia. So that's for the Russia. Of course, we still remain superpower. We are developing very, very good, but it's as always, Putin has two different audiences, within the country and outside of the country. So I believe this is the message for outside of the country, and this is the message mostly for the American elites. Guys, stop pressure us, because we already agree not to be a superpower, but do not intervene into our so-called sovereign democracy, and we will probably find out how we could cooperate. So this is the very practical message, and I'm seriously afraid that if the Trump will win, he will find out how it's possible to accept this message.
Dmitry, I think that kind of brings me to maybe the last area that I wanted to discuss with you today, and that is the huge disconnect between the two audiences that Putin is supposedly speaking to, as you mentioned. But I think more and more he really is just speaking to the audience of the Western leaders, and he really has taken the Russian people very much for granted. And while they don't feel this way, I think from the outside it seems quite obvious. And, even when there's a discussion about, are the oil prices coming up again? Or will there be Western investment in Russia because of this kind of a statement about not competing for superiority with the United States? In the end, this is really not going to help Russian people much, or people in Russia very much, because the civil liberties are not going to be, the restrictions are not going to be rolled back. The machine only works to tighten the screws. So the situation might improve for the oligarchs, and there might be a little bit of trickle down, but the situation for most Russians is not only getting worse, but it continues going unaddressed. And yet people are just kind of, hoping that the price of barrel of oil is going to go up, as if it's going to fix their problems. It just seems totally like two different conversations.
Absolutely, that's true. But one of the problems seems to me underevaluated in the Western countries is the fact that the country, most of the country, Russia, living in the feelings of I would say, Soviet resentment. and disregard of what Putin have said for American or European leaders. Okay, so we are not superpower, but we are interested to protect our own interest. Disregard of that, most of the people believe so we are superpower and we are restoring our position in international area because of the Putin's policy. And even in this situation, even facing the serious economical trouble and serious decreasing of the income, which is really well, I visited Russia a couple of times since I was fired from the State University of St. Petersburg, and I visited Russia and St. Petersburg. I can say this is the really visible. So it's the visible everywhere. The quality of the life seriously has been seriously decreased since the Crimea annexation, since this sanction was imposed. But the main issue, I believe, this is the kind of mobilization of most of the Russian people still very much mobilized, because this is against the Soviet legacy. So the people understood the situation as because of we are trying to restore our superpower, we should pay the price. So the price is to decreasing decreasing the income, decreasing the quality of life. So this is unfortunately the sign of the postponed Weimar syndrome. So the people are ready to live in not very proper way, I mean economically, but just to feel the symbolical superiority over the other countries. So this is unfortunately again so sign of postponed Weimar syndrome, which should happen in the 90s, but for different reason not happen at that time. But I believe that 20 years later we are living in this situation of the Soviet resentment and the situation of the Weimar syndrome, when the people really ready to accept the serious decreasing of the economical life, the quality of life, for these absolutely metaphorical, symbolical, narratively organized, I would say, superiority in the foreign policy.
You know, I guess with all due respect, I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that assessment, simply because it seems to me that people are just afraid that acceptance of these, well, at least our country is great now, is almost like an excuse or something that you tell yourself, because the other alternative is to go out in the street and nobody seems to want to do that. So they're kind of just like telling these tales to themselves and accepting the tales that are rolling at them from television channels, just so that they don't have to deal with the consequences of admitting that the country they live in is going downhill at a fast pace.
Well, again, so this is seems to me they oversimplified the story. There's a very popular formula in Russian media right now. So we have two parties of the TV against parties of fridge. And we have a fridge empty. The party of fridge will overcome the party of the TV. So, because TV demonstrating absolutely different picture.
Right.
But the problem is again, so the people do not pay a lot of attention to the Russian propaganda. So this Russian propaganda, it seems to me. Over demonized by here in Western countries, because this is, I'm afraid, not the reason what's going on in Russia, but rather on the feature. So this is the people they got mad not because of the Russian propaganda. They really applauded of the Russian propaganda, because finally, what the most of the population have said right now, finally, this is exactly what we would like to have on TV. And finally, TV just is representing our feelings and our hate against America, for example.
It's, again, I'm kind of going back to Trump, where some of the people that support him say, well, he says it like it is. It's the same thing you can say about that Russian propaganda. Well, it just shows things how they really are. Supposedly.
Yeah, but of course, the biggest issue, I believe, so for Russia is the fact that all the institutes of the civil protest, I mean legal protest, were destroyed. All the legal protests practically impossible, and this is one of the big fear I have, because in this situation when the basic institute of civil society had been destroyed, the legal protest is practically impossible, because the last example from my own city, the so-called sanctioned, that's very interesting. Well, you have had a special permission to get together for the different meetings. So the meetings of the bike lovers, I would say, the movement of the bikers in St. Petersburg, which is absolutely outside of any political sentiments. They just get together to discuss the development of the bike roads in St. Petersburg.
Are you talking about bikers or like bicyclists?
Bikers, but bicyclists.
Right, bicyclists, which are even more harmless than bikers.
Yeah. Well, it's not a biker. Sorry, it's a bicyclist. And the bicyclists, they got together. It's about 1,000, and they've got the permission from the city authority, and they were arrested. They were dissolute just because of somebody. Nobody knows whose decision it was, but it's fantastic. It's how the authority afraid of any public representation of any public activity of the people without any affiliations with any political party. So certainly what the people would like to discuss is the development of bicycle roads in the St. Petersburg. And what is the current conditions of how we could improve the bicycles movement in St. Petersburg? So they were dissolute. They arrested. They spent the night in the number of the police stations. So this is fantastic. So it's how the police, how the security forces, how they would like to prevent any kind of the public demonstrations and meetings, if these public demonstrations and meetings not directly organized by the political power. This is my serious fear about the development in Russia, because without the institute of the alternative opinions, without any opportunity for the legal protest, the country could turn into the illegal protest. I mean, violent protest. And in this violent protest, the avant-garde of this violent protest could be Russian nationalists, because they are very well trained, they very well organized, and they have a lot of against of Putin. So because we have interesting splitting right now within the Russian nationalist movement too, because number of them, they are very much applauded by the Crimea annexation and the invasion to Ukraine, and number of them are protesting against this. So this is also interesting development. But this is something which never had happened in the United States again. Even, although I'm atheist, I'll pray against the Trump. But I would say this is make the situation more predictable in the United States. This is the fact of the existence of a stable and working institute of the civil society, stable and working institute of the political decision-making process, and stable and predictable situation with the, I would say, correction of all the stupid ideas which might come into the Trump's mind. So that is, I believe, something which could save America for the future of the world, the future for the democracy of the world.
Dmitry Dubrovsky, scholar at Herriman Institute at Columbia University in New York City. Thank you so much for being on Rashkin Report.
Thank you.
You're listening to 91.7 FM, WSUW, in Whitewater, Wisconsin. You're listening to Rashkin Report.